Hi, everyone. I'm David Barnard, your host today, and here to chat with us about holiday promotions and discounts are Alice Muir and Annika Rabenstein from Phiture. They're both senior consultants on the retention team at Phiture. And I did want to give them both just a second to talk about their role at Phiture and even what Phiture is. So, Alice, why don't you take it away and tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Alice. I'm a senior growth consultant on the retention team at Phiture, obviously. I've helped many leading apps with their CRM and retention strategies. And in doing so, I have witnessed some really awesome holiday discounts and promo campaigns. And I'm really excited to talk to you all about those today. I'll pass over to Annika.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to meet you, basically. My name is Annika. I'm also working at Phiture. I'm doing the same job as Alice. I'm also a senior growth consultant, rather focused on technical stuff, but also have worked in the past in many startups with promotions. And additionally, I'm also the product owner for BeLayer.
Awesome. Oh, tell me what BeLayer is, because I actually didn't even realize this was something Phiture did. And then I think in the prep for this webinar, it came up and I was like, wait, what is this? So what is BeLayer?
That's true. I should be more clear on that one. So BeLayer is an in-app message builder studio, basically. So we saw that many people struggle with their in-app message campaigns, finding developer resources basically in their teams. So in this one, what we do is without SDK integration or any coding knowledge, people just create in-app messages, download them, drag and drop them into their tool they're using, and you just go with that and it works. So
is it open source or SaaS? Can other people use it, or is it only for Phiture customers?
It's SaaS. So we actually launched a new website yesterday.
Oh, cool.
And also the new tool. So I'm pretty proud of that. And I'm happy for people to try that out.
Awesome. Well, extra little pitch in there. So we're 2 minutes in. Everybody should hopefully have joined by now. If you're just joining us, we were doing quick intros. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I am developer advocate at RevenueCat. You've probably read my bio when you were signing up for the page or know me from the Sub Club podcast or the Sub Club community. So at RevenueCat, we are a subscription app platform, provide the base layer infrastructure and open source SDKs, pretty much everything you need to get your subscription app monetization going. We've got some great dashboards, integrations, all sorts of stuff. And we're a team of 60 people now, maybe more. It's hard to keep track. Just focused on building great tools for subscription apps and helping developers make more money. So really fun place to work. And I actually came to RevenueCat as an indie developer. So I've run and built apps for 15 years now, since the very beginning of the App Store. And one of the things I actually wanted to talk about today is that holiday discounts and promotions were like my Christmas bonus personally for years. I actually created this whole thing called App Santa, where a bunch of indie developers got together and we would drop our prices all together and get a bunch of press. And for several years, that was my holiday bonus. And then other years, Apple's done promotions and all sorts of things like that. So I'm actually really excited to talk about this today because it's something I've benefited tremendously from over the years. Just a couple of notes as we're getting going. If you have any questions, there should be a Q&A button or a questions button down below the videos. And pop your questions in there and then upvote any questions you see that you want to make sure and get asked, because we are going to leave plenty of time for questions. And so if you have a question, I'm terrible as a host of trying to read the chat and talk to Alice and Annika. So drop your questions there. And then at the end of us chatting, we'll answer a bunch of questions. Other thing is that this will be recorded and it will be shared to everyone who signed up. We probably will also post it to YouTube and things like that. So if you're wondering if it's going to be recorded, it will be, and you'll get the email. So without further ado, let's get talking. So the first topic I wanted to bring up is when to do promotions. And this kind of a multifaceted question. So, I mean, you have Easter and Christmas and Black Friday and 4th of July and Super Bowl and like all these different potential times to do discounts. And so, Alice, I wanted to know from your perspective, what are the best times to do promotions, and then kind of how to think about it generally. And do people get promotion fatigue? If you do is there a benefit of doing every single holiday, or maybe only ever doing a Black Friday promotion? So yeah, Alice, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great question. I think really understanding your user base and kind of getting to the bottom of where your user base are also based around the world as well. I think a big part of personalization is also, localizing your content, and that extends to promos as well. So understanding what are the kind of key holidays that your user base, your following will be paying attention to, and then kind of adapting your promotional strategy around that. And just on your question, David, on promo fatigue, I think this is really interesting. I don't know if you lot are like me, but if I know that a sale season is coming up, particularly like kind of Black Friday, which I know that especially in the world of like fashion and things, there's a bit of a morality question there as well, about fast fashion and kind of all the drama that happens around these deals. But I'm a special person, and I make a point of checking in with like the products and brands that I'm most engaged with as well, just ahead of those periods. And I'm quite sort of targeted and specific about it. So I want to understand like of the products, and that extends to kind of tech products, but also other brands and things that I follow, which of them will be getting involved in these types of big promotions. And then if it's something that I'm really interested in, I will actually mark my calendar. And I think that what could be quite an interesting thing for people to consider is that a way to sort of engage early on with like your power users and the people that are kind of extra engaged with or extra connected with your brand. And maybe something to test is to kind of communicate ahead of time that that's what you plan to do, so that you're targeting these people that are likely going to plan around this. Could be an interesting.
That's a great point. One of the things that we had talked about before too is, I listed off a bunch of American holidays because I'm American and very US focused. But are there other specific holidays that people should be thinking of globally? And then I guess it would depend a lot on and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, is understanding your user base. So if your app is huge in the US, then maybe you do focus your promotions on the major US holidays. But if your app is huge in Spain, or China is a great example, you wouldn't want to run your New Year's promotion on January 1st of the Gregorian calendar if you're running a New Year's promotion in an app that's huge in China, because they celebrate the New Year. I don't even know all the details, but as like a whole month, and it's like in February. And I don't understand all of that, but I understand enough to know that it's probably a bad idea to use your normal New Year's promotion. So Annika, is there anything else you wanted to speak to there? And then also, I know that what Alice was kind of alluding to as well about the timing. Do you have any thoughts on kind of getting ahead of the events and how to kind of strategically think about those promotions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I fully agree with everything that Alice said, and there's not too much to add. But I think when it comes to timing, if everyone who has observed their inboxes this week, because everyone knows Black Friday is coming, you see that many companies actually spread out their communication out. It's not sent on Friday morning anymore, but it's sent across the week. And I think that's where you also want to go, to not be one of 1,000 on Friday morning where you don't go into your inbox anymore, and and you just don't find what you're looking for. And then it also depends on what kind of business you're in. If you're a B2B or a B2C person, right? Like who's your user you're talking to? So you might want to send B2B clients rather emails in the morning, so it's on top of their inbox when they get into the office or while they're commuting, while other people, B2C clients, rather check their emails, especially for shopping. Alice, that was a great example. Especially for shopping in the evenings, like 8 to 10 p.m., interestingly. So I think it always comes down to that as well. And with the holidays, I I remember when I lived in Spain, I lived in the south of Spain for a while, and I wanted to celebrate Christmas, and they said, "Oh no, we don't do Christmas gifts on the 24th." And I said, "Why not?" And then they said, "Well, we do it on the 6th of January." So, and then that's when also the sale is happening. Like most of the Christmas sale is happening then, and you can get cheaper gifts actually for that date. So it's just really interesting. So every country has their own habits, I guess, even in Spain, where there's like different regions as well. So yeah, if you pay more attention to that, I think that's really important. And as you said, Asia is a really interesting market as well. We had a client in Asia as well, covering a lot of the market there, Korea, where they celebrate Mother's Day a lot. So, you know, you would go for that instead of the conventional holidays. So it's really interesting. There's definitely a lot for localization to be done.
Yes. So many great points. Alice, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, just on the Mother's Day, I've also seen some interesting discussion around these types of topics, Mother's Day and Father's Day and things as well. And I've seen some really effective campaigns, particularly over the last year as well, where it's kind of people are actually asking, you know, is this the type of thing that you want to receive? And I think that's also been very an interesting discussion in the sort of marketing world. But I also think it's been, you know, that it's kind of opening up that extra layer of being able to kind of engage with customers and sort of personalize to their preferences as well. So I think that's a really interesting example too.
Yeah, and the next thing I wanted to talk about kind of follows up on that, is that in some ways discounts aren't just about a discount, but there's also the kind of re-engagement and so I wanted to talk about the kind of psychology and goal, the intention of, you know, how developers should think about these discounts. And just curious to hear what you think about kind of balancing is it just the psychology thing? Like people love a good sale, and so you put it on sale. Is there kind of a re-engagement with your audience kind of perspective? And then, you know, I've also thought a lot about, I mean, especially in the subscription app space, you know, there's a lot of people who are kind of on the fence about a subscription where, oh, you know, Strava is great, but it's not really, I don't even know what their price is these days, $20 a month or whatever it is. And so, you know, maybe the discount also helps kind of pull in those people who are on the fence. So let's kick it off with Annika this time. How do you think kind of broadly about the kind of intentionality behind how you plan these promotions?
I think when it comes to the amount of promotion, like how much discount do you want to give the person, it heavily depends on your user segment, because I mean, you would not spend enormous amounts of money on users who are engaged with your app and constantly, you know, open your app and shop or do something, whatever your app does. While people you want to re-engage, you will see an increasing discount. Like you have reactivation emails that maybe start from 20%, but then after 5 weeks, they have not engaged. So you go up to 30%. You try to get them back and see maybe that there are changes on your app that might re-engage the user that you have lost before. So I think it's heavily dependent on the segment, like, and the user life cycle stage where the user is actually in. And I think Alice had also a really good example from a client as well on this segmentation point.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's really good to sort of segment and understand like who are the people that maybe were a bit hesitant to subscribe. They had sort of lower intention to subscribe, and how can we kind of use this as like a barrier to as a way to lower the barrier to entry, because ultimately, like the goal with well, it depends what your goal is. It might be publicity, or it might be to get people over the door with the aim of retaining them at full price further down the line. But it's kind of a way to introduce them to the premium versions of the product, the premium features of the product at a lower price point. So I think, you know, there's no point in kind of pricing so low that realistically you're just going to end up generating a whole load of churn, right? We want to kind of segment, understand like the different levels of intent. And there's lots of ways of doing that by looking at, you know, things like, have people interacted with certain features that might be behind a paywall? Have they demonstrated similar patterns of behaviors that are similar to people that do subscribe? And really kind of understanding like those different user segments, and then targeting those that you think just need that extra boost, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. And then one of the things I think a lot about too is a lot of apps will do these Black Friday promotions and say, do a crazy 60% off or 50% off or whatever. And then you end up with this cohort that may stay subscribed for a decade and they're on a 50% off plan. So Annika, how do you think about balancing the LTV considerations? And you kind of alluded to it already of, maybe your most engaged users, you only give them 20% off, but are there other considerations? And have you seen promotions where you are just doing, 50% off for 1 year and then it kicks back up? Or do you find a way to kind of get those folks back onto a more premium tier over time?
Yeah, I think we did that in the past, especially I think fitness apps are really good examples there. You see that a lot, that they give away a life plan
Right.
for, I don't know, 50 or 60 euros, and that's it. And then you will never make money of that again, right? I think that is a tricky one. It also depends on what state is the company in. Like, does it make any sense? It might be pretty interesting for companies in a really early state that really want the users and want some money in a few months, probably when you really have like high user acquisition and you really want to get users in. But then I don't think it's like a long-term plan of keeping this like long life plan for everyone who comes to your app. So I see this usually when it happens not for too long. It will be removed because it's not obviously not generating money anymore over time. But Alice is more the subscription optimization queen in this call. So I would also let her say something about that.
What a compliment. Thank you. And yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the percentage discount and whether that makes sense profitability wise. I mean, maybe you do offer this as kind of like as more of a lifetime offer, but the percent, the discount is priced in such a way that actually you just have to accept that you have this segment that maybe come in at a lower price point. And maybe that is going back to our intention conversation. Maybe that is because this is a segment that had either a lower intention to subscribe, or it's just a segment of users who wouldn't have been able to afford like the kind of the higher sort of premium price point. So again, it's all about just really segmenting your user base and really not kind of taking like a one size fits all or a blanket approach, but really understanding your users on a deeper level.
Yeah. One thing that came to mind as y'all were talking through that is that there are ways to upgrade people over time as well. So, with my Launch Center Pro app, it used to be a paid upfront app for $5. And so when we transitioned to subscription, one of the things we did was we offered this kind of legacy discount. And it can get to be a bit of management work for your engineering team to get all this sorted out. Revenue Cut actually makes this a lot easier with our entitlement system. But you could potentially set it up to where the Black Friday promotion subscription becomes a kind of legacy subscription. And then when you release a big new feature, that feature is not available on the discounted tier, and then they would need to upgrade to the premium tier. Now, you need to be really careful with those kind of things because you don't want to frustrate your user base and have it be kind of a penalization kind of thing. But I think there are ways to kind of think carefully about how you approach those things and potentially upgrade those folks over time who are on those kind of, if you kind of frame it that way, even kind of legacy discount plan, and find ways to kind of get them back onto a normal plan, or even create these. I mean, something I've been thinking a lot about even more broadly of having multiple tiers, of having a kind of base subscription tier and then a premium subscription tier. So that could be a way to do it, as well as in the future releasing a more kind of premium tier with a bunch of new features. And then that's a great opportunity to kind of upsell your whole user base, including the people who might be on a legacy discount plan. And then, of course, the whole thing with being able to use promo codes where it is a 50% discount for a year, and then they get back on the regular plan. All these things have to be balanced, and, conversion rates may be different. And, you always want to be thinking about the user perspective, but there's a lot of ideas there of how to run these things and think about it. So I've been monologuing a bit. Let's move on to the next topic. So the next most important thing, after you've kind of, considered, why you're doing the promotion, how you're going to segment, how much of a promotion to give, and figuring out all that out, is how do you actually tell people? and I think this in some ways is obvious, but I think requires, as with everything we're talking about, a bit more consideration to really be super effective. So Annika, why don't we kick off with email being kind of the most obvious one. But how do you think about kind of that mix between email, push, and in-app messaging, of how to kind of create an effective campaign to promote this discount?
Right. So I think cross-channel is always a good idea. So really leveraging the channels that you already have, right? That you all have basically, or use usually. I know that last year, it's actually a side fact that 20% of holiday sales came through email marketing. So it's still, even though people say email is dead, I think for some occasions it might be the case, but I think for sales is still where you reach most of the people, because you will not have everyone opted into your push notifications. Right. It's also with the new iOS versions, also with Android, way harder to reach the people, because people are in focus mode. People are having their own modes set up where you might end up in a whole list of notifications being gone. So I think it's a good idea to leverage all channels. For the users that are active in your app, you want to go for an in-app message, most likely, because the in-app message is definitely visible to them once they open the app, right? You can have the coupon in there, or you just say, look, we applied this discount already to your checkout. That's the easiest way, and probably the nicest for the user, because you don't have to copy paste anything. For the email, the same, like when then emails are sent out using, like you can reactivate, obviously, users that are not using your app anymore, have uninstalled, reactivate them like this. Also use deep links and a landing page just for a fallback, but use deep links into the app so you have the app launches, right? So there's a lot of opportunity with all the channels that you have to really leverage them. And I know that people think maybe it's too much to send everything, but again, not everyone will really reach, like, will see all of the stuff that you were actually sending. That is rarely the case, I think.
Yeah, Alice, anything to follow up on that?
Yeah, and I think Annika made some great points there. I think another thing that can be quite useful if you do have web payments is to also have like a kind of web discount code, because quite often these web discount codes can get picked up by other websites that want to mention these sort of big holiday deals and promotions, right? So it can be quite a nice way of like also increasing the presence and the sort of exposure to the deal, but also to the brand too.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's something I actually meant to bring up. Is part of how I did so well with the holiday promotions with my indie apps was that by collectively forming this App Santa promotion, we actually got a ton of press. And I think, with all especially around Black Friday and times like that, people like to talk about sales and discounts and stuff. And so, if you are doing a discount, pitch it. And then pretty much every major tech site has a pitch email or a form that you can fill out. And, odds may be relatively low, but it's not a lot of work to just go ahead and do that extra step of pitch all the websites you can think of off the top of your head. So it's just another way to get a little extra boost from these promotions. So we are running a little short on time, so let's speed run the next couple and maybe combine them both. But designing effective creatives and writing compelling promotional copy, I think they kind of bundle well anyway. But Alice, why don't you tell us kind of your thoughts about how to effectively message this? And you know, creatives are such a huge deal for user acquisition. I think sometimes retention gets short shrift where you know the design team just throws something together and like, oh yeah, that'll work. Versus, you know, with user acquisition, you're doing hundreds of different creatives and, you know, A/B testing all different kind of promotional messages in the ad copy and things like that. So how do you think about promoting these promotions?
I think you need to be designing for conversion, which is something that people can sometimes get lost in making something look really fancy and kind of complex. Right. But simply, we need to be designing for conversion. I think that SoundCloud, from what I've seen working with SoundCloud at Phiture, they are particularly good at some of their holiday promos. I think some of the Black Friday promos that they've had. And one of the reasons why I really like them is that they talk about the benefits of the promo to the user. So all of the copy is things like unlimited uploads, like you know, this kind of messaging where it's like benefits to the user, as opposed to talking in sort of product or feature specific terms. And I think that's something that can quite often be overlooked, where a lot of people, you know, they might shout about you know, subscribe in order to or subscribe at this special price in order to access XYZ, but ultimately they're not really speaking in like the user's kind of terms, if that makes sense. I think that's something that's really important, and definitely if you're looking for inspiration, check out some of SoundCloud's examples, because they're really great.
Yeah, one of the things you had brought up previously when we were chatting about this is how localizing creatives can be so important as well. You know, we were kind of talking about localizing the holidays themselves, but even things like Christmas are represented differently in different cultures. And so I thought that was really insightful when you shared that with me earlier this week, is that, you know, again, I'm just so US centric, and and I appreciate chatting with folks like you who work with apps that are more successful internationally, and you live in Europe yourself, so you have a more sensitivity to that. So, you know, Santa Claus is not the universal Christmas image. And so, you know, if your app is big in countries that celebrate Christmas but don't use the same kind of US centric imagery, that's a great opportunity to do something that kind of acknowledges the culture that you're speaking to. Annika, anything else you wanted to share on effective creatives and copy?
No, I think you just pointed it out. I think there's many examples here in Europe where you would adjust, you would adjust the design, or at least the creatives a little, so it fits what the people expect for Christmas, even though I think everyone has adapted to the universal Santa Claus, most likely in Europe at least. But there's still extra days, right? We have in Germany on the 6th of December, we have Nikolaus, which looks really close to the Santa Claus, but he's not. So it's a special day that is celebrated also with little gifts. So it's another opportunity. Same with Spanish Santa Claus. He looks also different. So if you go for that really localized images, I think it's more better converting than actually the universal thing that everyone knows.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So the last thing before we take questions is, how do you think about measuring impact? And Alice, I'll go with you first. You know, we could get super technical about, you know, the tools and data warehouse and, you know, measuring everything and following up and all that. But let's, you know, for the sake of brevity, let's just take a little bit of a higher level. And when you think, and this doesn't apply just to holiday promotions either, but, you know, when you're doing an A/B test with a customer, or doing a discount promotion or a win back campaign, how do you think about measuring the results to really understand how effective it was and then inform, you know, future promotions?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and I think there's lots of layers to it, to be honest. I mean, it really depends obviously on what the original goal of the campaign was. If it was to get more subscribers over the door, for example, it wasn't purely for kind of like brand promotion, then you would really want to be making sure that your chart, like that you were not bringing in a whole load of people that are going to churn, right? Because even though you've got that initial what looks like revenue, you know, for me, I think that ultimately would be bringing kind of like long-term gains. So I think that's something that you want to be really mindful of. It's kind of similar to when we're consulting with clients. We want to say be really careful not to over optimize for trial starts, because ultimately trial starts again don't bring revenue, right? So we want to be kind of thinking long term. It's not really different in this case. And I think as well, you want to be really careful about the type of traffic that the promo brings to your product, to your app as well, because sometimes what ends up happening is you bring a bunch of people, you know, you bring an audience that have very, very low intention to be kind of long-term subscribers, and that can obviously bring down ultimately can kind of lower your conversion rates. And I saw that happen with an app that I worked on last year, where it wasn't necessarily a promo, but a similar type of scenario where a whole load of traffic had come to the app for something that was being sort of spotlighted or highlighted, and ultimately that it wasn't really the right audience that should have been targeted, and it was quite difficult to recover from that. So I think, you know, continuing to think long term and thinking about, you know, long term impact and what the ultimate goal of the campaign is really important, and not to get caught up in sort of short term metrics.
Yeah, that's a great point. Annika, anything else to add?
Not really, no. I agree on that fully. I mean, with experiments, running experiments, maybe also having a baseline from last year, right, would be great. So, you know, am I going with the same discount? Do I reduce it a little? How many people actually churned after? Like they came with a discounted price. How many churned then again? I think it's really interesting to then adjust to this year's campaigns and users, and use what you have already and what you have learned from the past, and not do the same mistakes again, basically.
Yeah, you know, I think that's something that's actually overlooked broadly in subscription apps, because it's just so hard to do. And this is actually something we're working on at Revenue Cat to make it easier and easier to do this. But doing a look back analysis on prior promotions, prior A/B tests, you know, because there's so many times when, you know, you change the paywall and you get a 15% lift in trial starts and a 10% lift in total, you know, subscribers. And then exactly what Alice was saying, you're bringing in the wrong audience, or you're kind of funneling the wrong audience to become subscribers, and your churn actually ends up going up. And if you're not looking back at those earlier experiments with long-term retention data and long-term user activity data, then you're really missing out on the full learning. It's like you can do a quick A/B test and understand, okay, how does this impact me right now? But with a subscription app, the goal is, you know, a decade of continuous subscription. Ultimately, I mean, that's kind of the ultimate ideal. And so if that's your ultimate ideal, you need to orient your learnings around that ultimate goal, and not ignore those past experiments when you're planning your future experiments. So really great points there. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up and take some questions. It looks like we've got a few. If you have a lingering question that hasn't been answered yet, go ahead and drop it in now. But we'll take this first one. Question is, what is the best way to apply promo discounts on your app? Is it by applying a 40% discount for a week on all users, by promo code, promo ad viewers? So Alice, you want to talk to that? And we can talk broadly, and then maybe I'll get a little more technical.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. So what is the best way to apply promo discounts on our app? I think it all really depends. I'm not sure that it would be easy to kind of answer that as like a one size fits all. I think it would really have to understand a bit about what you were trying to achieve with the discount, what kind of product you had, and then understanding like what the kind of strategy was around that. So yeah, I mean, a 40% discount for a week, if you think that was going to be optimal for bringing people over the door in order to get them to sort of have a chance to play around with the premium features, and that discount price you think was enabled you to sort of have people then subscribe further down the line, and it's not going to massively hurt your profit margin, then I think why not? But it really depends. It would have to kind of understand what your profit margin was in order to understand what sort of percentage you should be aiming for. And as I said, earlier, as we talked about, understanding what the kind of ultimate goal was that you were trying to achieve as well.
Yeah, Annika, any follow up there?
No, it's true. Like, I think with all those questions that are really specific to an app, it's hard to reply to, like, give the one size fits all approach is not a thing, as Alice said. So it's hard. I think what would be good is also to be a little more creative with promotions. Does it need to be a 40% off, or can it also be a 14 days trial instead of the usual 7 days trial, right? Like, what is the plan for your users? Maybe they just need a little more time. They haven't seen all the features. Maybe that is already enough to engage them instead of spending all that money to engage them with a 40% discount, and then they churn,
I think
go ahead.
Apologies, David. I think that's a good point, Annika, just on the 40%, as well as like really kind of understanding, which users would that 40% work for. But actually, if there are users that we could get in, and I think you mentioned this earlier, at even 5% discount or 10%, segmenting to, so that you're not sort of hurting your potential basically to get more people in over the door.
And then I did want to follow up, and I don't have a super deep technical answer for you on this, but there are kind of benefits and drawbacks to all the different ways to do a discount. So, if your plan is to do what I was talking about earlier, where you consider this discount a kind of legacy subscription, and you want to eventually upgrade people to a more premium tier or something, in that case, doing a separate discounted SKU might actually be a better way to run the discount, as if you were doing a price test where you create a separate SKU for the lower price. So that's an option. Now, then you have to manage multiple SKUs, and it's all the same kind of challenges that you have with price testing. But it does set you up for being able to move people from that SKU to a different SKU versus just being on the lower price of the SKU that's already there. I actually hadn't even considered this. And so I don't know my own answer, but I'll ask a question, and it's something, maybe we can follow up on in the sub club community or somewhere like that. But with Apple's ability to increase prices, I actually have not looked into whether or not you can, discount your subscription price temporarily, raise it back to normal, and then segment the users who are on that lower price and only raise the price for them. Because with Apple's new price raising thing, you can raise the price on existing subscribers. And so if that's possible, that might be another way. Now, you risk churn, of course, because they're going to get an email that says your subscription price is going up. But that's one way to do it. Promo codes are a pain to use, or not promo codes, but promotional offers are a pain to use. You have to do, and at Revenue Cat, we help a little bit with this, but there's still some heavy lifting on the engineering team to get it all implemented. But with promotional offers, you can do what I was talking about, where, if the 40% discount is what you think is going to be most effective, you can set that discount to those specific time periods. So a week seems pretty short to me from a kind of, user perspective of, but again, it does depend on your app. If you are using weekly subscriptions and your average subscriber only subscribes to the app for 2 months because you're like a test prep app or something, and they're just going to use it for a month or two and then churn anyway, then maybe a week or two of a discount is super attractive, because then, they're like, well, I'm going to cram this test prep in the next week while it's 40% off, and then I'll churn after that. And then, maybe it takes them 2 or 3 weeks. And so, that could potentially, for your specific app, if it's that kind of scenario, be very attractive. Generally, 40% off for a week doesn't feel like a huge, kind of incentive to the user. But again, if from a technical standpoint, if you're doing that, the best way to do it would be with the either a discount code or a promotional offer. And so, you can play with all those things to figure out implementation wise what makes sense. New SKU, promo code, promotional offers. There's like so many different ways to do it. Actually, we have a post up on the RevenueCat blog about referrals, and it talks through some of this, about how those different promo codes versus promotional offers and kind of the benefits and drawbacks of those. So that was a very long, thorough answer. Not super technical, but I hope we kind of got you what you needed there. So let's answer a few more here. Which tools should you start at the beginning, starting first-time discounts with a new app? Any thoughts there, Annika or Alice?
With which tools should you start at the beginning? I guess I would need a bit more context. What tools are we referring to? I take it, because I want to say RevenueCat, but I'm not quite sure.
Of course, RevenueCat always. But I think I can take this one. If you're just getting started with doing these kind of things, something like Firebase is free and cheap and easy to get started, where you can do multi-channel. OneSignal is another great kind of entry point into this multi-channel CRM. And then there's a ton of great tools, and RevenueCat integrates with most of them, all of them. Iterable, Braze, there's so many great tools now for multi-channel communications. So if you're just getting started and you have collected email, if you have gotten push notification access, and if you want to do in-app messaging, pretty much any of those tools will kind of offer you the full suite. And then, as we found out today, belayer might actually be a nice, I don't know that any of those other tools do an especially good job, and that's probably why you created belayer, of doing those in-app messages. So yeah, I would look at which of those kind of CRM tools, and Firebase isn't really CRM, but Firebase tries to be kind of the bucket that does everything, not everything incredibly well, but everything good enough. So they kind of have CRM-like tools. It's not going to be as sophisticated as a OneSignal or an Iterable or a Braze or any of those. But you just need to analyze, which tool is not only going to serve this particular discount and promotion, but what might actually be a great CRM tool to use long-term to do other re-engagement campaigns and to engage with your users over the long haul. So pick a tool based on kind of that long-term thinking, since you're going to have to spend the time implementing it anyway. But those would be the kind of tools that you would use to communicate about these promotions.
Just one thing on that, David, before we move on, as well as we're actually, Pierre and my team is writing an article just now about the limitations of that kind of testing through CRM versus doing it more native, taking a more native approach to it. So one thing just to be very aware of, as well, is obviously, like, if you're wanting to have a discount that's kind of part of your upsell or your paywall screen, is just to kind of understand what the limitations are of kind of serving that natively through CRM, where you might be relying on things like servers and stuff like that too. So just something to be mindful of. Yeah,
great point. That sounds like it's going to be a great article. All right, next question. And so there's not going to be an answer to this one, but it'll actually be fun to theorize. What kind of conversion rate should we anticipate for a 40 to 50% off Cyber Monday / Black Friday style promotion we're sending to canceled subs. So the answer is we don't know, but Alice and Annika, I know y'all have both run all sorts of different promotions across all sorts of different apps. Can you give us the kind of top quartile, low quartile? Have you seen some like crazy engagement rates, and then have you seen some crazy low engagement rates, and maybe even some nuance as to why you think maybe some were more successful and some less successful? So without answering specifically, because I don't think there is an answer, what are your kind of general thoughts on how you should expect performance to be for these kind of promotions?
Yeah, so I think if I may take this one, so I think it heavily depends on when did the user cancel the subscription and how active was this user in the time before they canceled. Because if you have an app that requires daily or I don't know, a couple of times weekly interaction, and you have a core retention metric of workout started or whatever, I love fitness apps apparently. So if that's the case, then and the user has not been active for like 3 months, and the cancellation ran, or then they canceled because they figured they don't need it anymore. If they have been that active, I would think that the offer is a good one, and the conversion rate on that segment will be higher. But if it's someone who has churned really early on because they did a trial and they haven't been active in like 6 months or more, the conversion rate will be really low. That's the overall thing I can say. So you might want to target those people who have canceled recently, who were engaged with your app, to actually get them back, engage them with the offer, but also with new features that you have added to the app since, so they actually have a reason to come back and use your app.
Great answer. Alice, anything to follow up?
Yeah, I love that answer because it kind of ties into the theme that we've been talking about throughout, which is really like segmenting, right, and not having this one size fits all. So I love the fact that, Annika, you're highlighting that it depends on churn reasons, and actually, if you want a really effective campaign, get to the bottom of those churn reasons, and then sort of and kind of align your follow up or win back campaigns based around that. And I think that's something that, for example, with a shameless plug, but with Phiture, it's one of the things that we can do is we can kind of create these surveys that you can then serve through like in-app messages in order to capture churn reasons as responses and attach them as kind of user attributes as well. So yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. Now, I said it's unanswerable, and that was a great answer, Annika. But what I mean, ballpark. What are some of the re-engagement stats you've seen? Because I think some people overestimate how these things are going to perform. So, off the cuff, I would personally be expecting single to low double-digit engagement rates, not like a 50% of everybody who sees this message. And then you also have to think about the whole funnel of this too, is that, if you send it to 100,000 users, how many actually see the promotion? As we talked about, the push notifications are getting lost because of redesigns with Google and Apple's notification systems. So push, how many are actually even going to see the push? In-app messaging is probably one of the higher converting because people are actually in the app engaging with the app. But again, how many of your churned users are still in the app engaging with the app? Probably very few. So then your email, you send 100,000 emails out. How many of those people actually see the email, open the email, engage with the email? And so it really is a numbers game where you're going to start with what seems like a really big number. Wow, I'm sending 100,000 emails. Surely, 10% are going to take me up on this offer. But then you realize, well, geez, only, 40,000 actually saw the email, and then only 20,000 actually clicked on the button, and that may even be generous. And then once they get to the checkout screen, only 10% of those people who actually got to the checkout screen actually do. So my overall kind of general take would be that you should, have fairly low and realistic expectations and kind of think about that whole funnel. So yeah, any kind of additional thoughts from the two of you on, where to set those expectations for these kind of promotions?
Yeah, I think yes, I think that's actually one of the reasons why we say that in-app messages are one of the best channels in terms of conversion, is because of that funnel that you just mentioned. But what I would like to say though as well is that with email and conversion as well, I think one thing that you should be thinking about is also understanding the different segments that your email might be going to as well, and really analyzing those different segments. I worked on a project last week where I was working with one of the principal data analysts from Phiture, and they found out that actually women were more than twice as likely to convert from email than men. So I thought that was a really interesting insight and a reminder to kind of not be complacent about, your kind of segmentation and really understanding like who these campaigns are going to, and then sort of figuring out what channels are best for delivery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. We've got time for one, maybe two questions. So take a second to upvote any questions you really want to see answered in the next 9 minutes. Usually I've gone up to 2 hours on these webinars before, but I really wanted to keep this one in an hour. So give you a couple of more seconds to upvote anything you really want to see. And then I just realized I'm not filtering by upvotes. Boom. Okay. Got a question from the Revenue Cat team. Have you found that users that purchase a holiday discounted subscription are more likely to churn if the renewal is at full price? That's a great question. Either of you have experience specifically? And now, maybe not with holiday promotions, but other kind of win back campaigns or other promotions, if you don't have specific experience with the holiday promotions.
I think it's a great question. And I always like to look at myself first. And if you all look at yourselves for a second and really think about like, how often does this happen to you, that you get a great discount and you're like, oh yeah, I sign up for this. It's a 6-month discount, a 1-year discount, right? And then you cancel right away because you don't want to miss out on the cancellation, that comes in a year. I think many people do that. And I think I can imagine, I don't have real numbers, but I can imagine that on especially holiday discounts, this is a typical thing that people really take it. They're like, oh yeah, I get this really cheap for a year, but I'm not ready to pay double the price after a year. And I also don't want to forget about it. So I think that's a normal behavior. I would think like most of us think that way. I think the only one that I renewed recently was actually the New York Times subscription, because I really enjoy reading the articles in the morning. But it's a useful one, but any other ones, other industry, it's hard to really.
That's funny you brought up the New York Times, because that's exactly what I was thinking when you were saying that kind of mentality. And the New York Times specifically, because it's very expensive. So I actually just signed up again, and I was on their promotion of 1 year for $60 or something.
Same.
But then if I stay subscribed, it's like $300 or something. And yeah, it's very expensive. And so, that's a great example of, I am probably one of those people who, and this is kind of gets at what we were talking about earlier, is that in some ways these holiday promotions are an off-ramp for people who find your app valuable, but not that valuable. So to me, the New York Times is a $60 a year subscription, but not a $300. I don't read it enough. I don't, go browse it every morning. It's more that I like to have paywall access for when I see a story I want to read. And so it really is, for me, $60 a year of value. And I'm just not going to pay $300 a year. So it's a great point to kind of get in the user mindset and try and understand the value that people see in your subscription. And that kind of helps balance it, where maybe not raising the price on them is a way to actually improve churn over the long haul. by keeping that segment who just doesn't value your app as much, paying less money for it. And that's where, again, I love talking about tiers and like multiple pricing tiers and things like that, because I do think as the subscription app industry matures, and we've seen this in SaaS and web subscriptions, Netflix, Disney Plus, all of these kind of more sophisticated, larger companies are starting to get into tiering the subscription so that your kind of best, most loyal, most dedicated users who get the most value can pay you more. And then the people who love your product but just don't find that much value or have different economic scenario. And coming into recession, I think it's another kind of important thing to be thinking about too, is that we probably will see churn for some of these higher priced subscriptions. And when you're just $3 a month versus $20 a month, you're kind of lower hanging fruit for people to churn out. So there's a ton of considerations there. Alice, anything you wanted to add before we move on?
Yeah, I think the New York Times is a fantastic example. I mean, I use the New York Times for like their cooking and recipes, and so I wouldn't necessarily want to be, signed up to the full package. For example, I wouldn't necessarily be interested in any kind of like sport content, and I'd probably get the majority of my news elsewhere. So I think that's a really good point that you make. And yeah, absolutely, we need to expect that some of these higher tier subscriptions will take, or more premium subscriptions will take a bit of a hit over the recession periods. I've certainly done it myself, where I've kind of had a bit of a look through my bank statements and to understand what's kind of coming out every month. And I expect that, there will be a lot of people asking those questions as well. So definitely agree with all of that.
Yeah, that actually may be a great opportunity, and it's something that we're actually RevenueCat. We're releasing a price testing feature coming up here in the next, I think, 2-3 weeks, right after the Thanksgiving holiday, U.S. holiday. Not something either of you will be celebrating, but that's something that I've been thinking a lot about. Is that with the recessionary pressures, it might actually be a good time for a lot of subscription apps to test a lower price, and to maybe even offer and this is kind of on the topic of today, of maybe offer a kind of recession discount even to some of your existing users who are likely to churn, or as a win back of somebody churns out and say, hey, we know times are tough, here's a 50% discount for the next year or the next 2 years or indefinite, as we've discussed. And again, just something to be thinking about. But I hadn't even thought about that the kind of recession as a win back campaign actually might be a really smart strategy over the next 6 months, because it's true. We all feel it, right? I mean, I did the same thing. I went and canceled a few subscriptions, but you know what I canceled? I canceled the things that I don't use that often, that I don't find that much value. And so, I talk about this a ton on the podcast and in the webinars and in the blog posts I do. And so much of it really just comes back down to value. And so, when you're thinking a holiday promotion is going to solve all your problems, or generate enough revenue or whatever, there aren't these kind of magic bullets that are just going to turn your business around. But what over time turns your business around is just delivering more and more value. And then you're less likely to have people churn. You're more likely to have people willing to pay full price. The people who get the discount are going to cherish that discount and stick around. So much of it just comes down to delivering value. That was a huge tangent off of the original question. Let's hit one more before we go. Our mobile app is normally has a $40 annual subscription. What promo do you think would work best in terms of maximizing revenue for Black Friday and Cyber Monday? I'll leave that to either of you to kick off.
Yeah, I think this is a good question, but another one that unfortunately wouldn't be able to give you a specific answer on, or wouldn't want to give you a specific answer on. Instead, I think I'd want to encourage you to think about, well, what is your cost of acquiring these users? what makes sense in terms of profitability, and also what makes sense in terms of traffic quality, right? So what makes sense in terms of getting people over the door, but it's not so low that it's kind of unrealistic in terms of keeping those subscribers on. I think as well, David, going back to your point just there about value, I think one thing that Robbie Kilman-Baxter actually had said in one of the Revenue Cap podcasts, which really kind of ran true for me, was that people, if there's a product that you kind of fits within your life, and this is kind of very, very valuable within your life, and that becomes a part of your lifestyle, and then there's within limits, there's that you're probably going to pay, you're probably going to still be a user of it if there is a slight increase in price as well, right? So within limits, obviously, if products start kind of paying, charging like 3,000 a day or something like that, or 3,000 a month overnight, you would notice, right? But within limits, I think pricing, as long as you're still continuing to kind of add value to users, I think that people will still kind of maintain their subscriptions over time. And I think that, going back to the question about what is the best price in terms of maximizing revenue for these types of deals, I think we just need to be thinking about what percentage actually makes sense in terms of the strategy. What are we actually offering as part of that deal, and how does that kind of add value to the user, and will sort of get them to experience something that then they can kind of use more long term.
I think that's a great way to wrap up. Just back to the fundamentals, just thinking about the value you're delivering and the perception of users of the price that you're charging for the value you're delivering. So great way to wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining us. And for those of you watching this on YouTube, 6 months, a year later, and keep an eye out for, I believe you're signed up for the notification of the recording. And then a couple of quick plugs as we wrap up too. We've talked about it a couple of times here, but the Subclub podcast, we have conversations like this every 2 weeks with subscription app experts. So check it out at subclub.com. We also run a community, or I run a community, the Subclub community. It's chat.subclub.com. You'll find a link to sign up for the wait list there, where 500 plus super sharp subscription app folks talk about all sorts of stuff, from price testing to creatives and user acquisition and all that kind of stuff. It's a great place to talk about this. And then the last thing I want to wrap up with is Phiture. Thank you so much for joining us. And Phiture is a fantastic company. They work with all sorts of different apps. And one of the things I love about companies like Phiture is that they work with so many different apps over so many, almost a decade now or more since Andy and Moritz founded Phiture. And so the team collectively just has so much depth of experience. And so you'll see that reflected not just in being their customer, which is great if you're looking for a mobile growth consultant, and you'll do ASO consulting. And Phiture is kind of a full, what do you call yourself? Full spectrum agency. But then also they do a ton of great webinars, blog posts, a ton of great content. They're really, honestly, one of the best content generation teams in the kind of subscription app space. So if you haven't signed up for their newsletter or subscribed to their blog, definitely check that out. So any parting thoughts from the two of you as we wrap up?
Thank you so much for having us and for all the compliments just now. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a lot of fun. And I loved hearing both of your thoughts around this too. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.